So a few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to get to go to a fan preview screening of the new Hawkeye series that debuts on Wednesday, 24th of November on Disney Plus. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, free food, and to top it off, Haley Stanfield and Jeremy Renner actually showed up, so it was really cool to see them in person. The show is loosely based on the Marvel Now era Hawkeye series that was written by Mac Fraction. Um, I guess I came into the screening with not low expectations but measured expectations. Phase 4 has been good so far, but it hasn't really been hitting out of the park for me. Phase 3 was really, really good. Phase 1 was amazing. I was disappointed by Phase 2, but it had the highlight of the MCU with Winter Soldier in there. So there hasn't really been a moment in Phase 4 that I've really been gobsmacked by. I'm still waiting for that. Again, I don't think it's bad. It's just not been hitting out of the park for me. So I came in with measured expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think what the show gets right is it really characterizes the sort of tone of that series. It was post Dark Reign, post Siege, and it was very much a revamp era because DC was simultaneously doing the New 52 over on their side. So Marvel Now, it felt like an injection of fresh air at the time. I remember reading it because a lot of the sort of like late noughties content was very dark, grim, and gritty. You know, you had Alias, you had Ed Brubaker's run on Daredevil, you had Spider-Man One More Day. There was like a lot of like quite darker sort of stuff happening at Marvel, and the Marvel Now era really took the opportunity to sort of make everything sort of fun again. There was a lot of dynamic storytelling through artwork. Colors were brighter, and I remember just like things, particularly with the street level characters, becoming a bit more jovial. Daredevil, Spider-Man, Hawkeye, like that. Though I remember the content in those comic books at the time being a lot lighter than they had been 2, 3 years previous. So the show really does have that sort of same vibe, and the MCU in general is quite jovial. It's gotten a lot more jovial in recent phases, but I enjoyed it in this particular example. I'm not the biggest fan of the Marvel comedy, but I think the way it was laced into these first 2 episodes was really, really good. I loved the relationship between Kate and Hawkeye. I loved how they linked Kate's origin back to films in Phase 1. There was a lot of really good stuff here. The family dynamic between Hawkeye and his kids post-snap. Hawkeye dealing with mental trauma, physical trauma, and I think the way that they sort of dealt with Hawkeye's physical trauma was actually quite interesting. Something that we haven't seen before. So I would say I was pleasantly surprised. I think this is potentially the most entertaining first 2 episodes of any of the Marvel shows on Disney Plus. WandaVision, I think, was the best because those first 2 episodes are very, very intriguing, mysterious. You didn't really know what was going on. So that's what really hooked you, and they really managed to hook you with those first 2 episodes. There's also the complaint that there wasn't enough action, so I hear that. I think Loki had a very, very strong start as well. At least in the first episode, there was a lot of like heartfelt moments with Loki seeing his future. The second episode, I don't remember being as wowed by it. But with this, the first 2 episodes, both of them together, they were really entertaining, heartfelt, and there's enough intrigue in there to get you to want to watch the rest. Particularly with what's going on with the tracksuit Draculas or tracksuit Mafia and Kate's stepfather. And her mum as well. You get this idea of an underground criminal something going on that they're attached to that we don't quite know the full extent of. So there is that intrigue that gets you to want to continue watching. There's also the idea that Clint is going to have to deal with his past in terms of what he was doing when he was Ronin, and then also if you saw the end credit scene of Black Widow, particular characters from that movie coming to this show. And yeah, I think this is probably the most I've enjoyed Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye so far in the MCU. He's kind of been relegated to just the human one in the Avengers, and you sort of really see his humanity come out, both in the sense of as a character personally, but also like physically. You see the fact that this is just a guy. He isn't special in the same way that the other members of the Avengers are special. So that was really interesting. I was really, really sort of wondering how the Tracksuit Mafia banter would translate from comic book to show. And I think it worked. I think they pulled it off well enough. I'm interested to see if a particular panel from the comic will turn up in the show, because I've seen, not in the first 2 episodes, but in the trailer, there is the car chase sequence, which is essentially taken straight from the comic. So I'm wondering if a particular scene, and I think comic readers will know what scene I'm talking about, will end up in the show. But yeah, I think if you like the MCU, you'll love this show. And if you maybe haven't been wowed by the rest of Phase 4, definitely give this series a chance. I'm definitely going to give it a chance based on the first 2 episodes, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it ends up being at the end of its run. I think it's only 6 episodes, so I've got 4 more hours of this to see, and I'm excited for them. So yeah, definitely give it a shot. It was a whole load of fun. And if you haven't, go out and read the Matt Fraction run on Hawkeye. Marvel Now was a really, really good moment. You had stuff with the X-Men, Hickman on Avengers. There's a lot of good stories out there for people that haven't touched comic books before. And it was intended to be like a jumping off point. It was intended for people that, if you haven't read comics, this is for you. I guess those stories are almost a decade old now, but there's definitely a lot of fun to be had. And I definitely recommend going to those stories and picking them up. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the first episode of Hawkeye. Be sure to watch it on the 24th. Peace.